Welcome to San Diego Comic-Con 2021, and welcome to the Titans book, Black Panther Tales of Wakanda panel. This fine book is out right now on audiobook, on Audible. You can find it in all of the best bookstores and comic book shops. And of course, you can also buy it on Kindle or Nook or wherever you read your personal ebooks. My name is Jesse J. Holland. It is my honor to be the editor of Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. And joining me today are three of the fabulous writers that I had the pleasure to work with on Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. And we're going to sit here today and we're going to talk everything Wakanda. So sit back with us and stick with us for the next few minutes as we talk about Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. Joining me today are three of my favorite people on this earth. And I'm going to introduce them and tell you what they did with Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, and then we're going to get into a discussion. So first of all, we're going to start with Tananarive Due. Tananarive, for Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, wrote a great T'Challa story that features one of my favorite characters in all of comic bookdom. Not just T'Challa, but Aurora Monroe, Storm, in her story, Return of the Queen. Next, we have Cadwell Turnbull, who delved into the psyche of the Black Panther's greatest enemy and the one man the Panther has never really beat. That was Eric Killmonger in his story, Killmonger Rising. And then we have Sheree Renee Thomas, whose story, Heart of a Panther, took the Black Panther to a place where we'd never seen him, the Mississippi Delta. All of these stories are available to you right now in Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, and we get to talk to these authors about what they did and how they chose these stories. First of all, good evening, everyone.
Great to be here.
All right, so let's start with this question. What made you decide that to be involved with Black Panther Tales of Wakanda? I was lucky enough to give all of you at some point a call or email and say, hey, this book's coming out. I'd love to read a story from you. But what made you decide that this was something you wanted to be part of? Now I'll start with you, Sheree.
Well, first of all, it's the Black Panther. And I can just say personally, being a native of Memphis, Tennessee, which was, I think, the largest market in the United States to go and see the movie and return and see it again, it made a huge impact on our community. We absolutely loved seeing this legendary figure brought to life on the big screen, and just seeing all of the joy in people's eyes and the conversations, very interesting, deep, broad conversations, just reminded me of just how powerful, these kinds of stories can be. So Marvel, Jesse, Tananarive Due, absolutely, I wanted to be a part of it. And thank you so much, Tananarive, for thinking of me. Thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate it. It was an amazing experience.
And since you've already been name checked by two people on the panel, Tananarive, I'm going to jump to you next.
Okay, well, I really owe my involvement to you, Jesse, for reaching out. I mean, I'm just going to keep it real. As exciting as this opportunity was to be able to write a prose story set in the Black Panther world, I was worried I wouldn't have a time, and it's one of those things where you don't want to overcommit and disappoint people. And I was very much afraid of doing that. But between your persuasiveness, your patience and thoughtfulness, and sort of talking me through, like, if I said, am I allowed to write about Storm? And you're like, of course. And I'm like, oh, well, wait a minute. And that really was a game changer for me, to, sometimes you have to find the time. You have to wade through your schedule and say, okay, I'm going to do this. And I was very lucky. I had just finished working with Steve on something for Realm, formerly Cereal Box, that was set in Wakanda. And I had my big Black Panther dictionary, because otherwise, I don't know if I could have pulled it off. It was such a tight deadline. But I'd already been sort of immersed in the world of Wakanda for that project. So I was able to use that experience to jump right in.
And Cadwell, you are so busy with everything else. What made you decide to take time out to delve into Wakanda?
I mean, I don't think I'm as busy as Tananarive, but yeah, you as well. Like, I feel like, she's speaking to the same experience that I had. You gave me so much patience, so much guidance, a lot of help, bringing this to life. But, I think the reason why I wanted to do it was because I watched the film as well. And I had a lot of feelings about Killmonger, and, he's just like a really great antagonist. And I knew immediately that I wanted to do a Killmonger story and explore some of his conflicts and, give him explore some of, the moment in his life where he's making the big decision to be the man that he will become. And I thought, yeah, why not? Like, and I was also living in Boston at the time. I'm right now visiting for a little bit, but I was living in Boston. MIT was right down the street. I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to explore that avenue of his life, since he was an MIT grad, and it was, just, perfect timing.
Now, speaking of the movie, when the Black Panther movie came out, Wakanda became known around the world. Before the movie, there were some of us who already knew Wakanda because, we're old comic book heads. So we already knew how awesome the Black Panther was and how incredible Wakanda is. But when the movie came out, that knowledge went worldwide. But my question, Tananarive, is why do you think Wakanda is so important to so many people around the world? Just the idea of Wakanda.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wakanda is a very powerful idea. And I remember when Black Panther came out, there were so many memes, empty office buildings, because people were skipping work to go see the movie. Of course, the dancing children who were so filled with joy when they heard they were going to see. I still use that all the time. And that idea of packing your bags, the packing your bags meme was probably one of the most popular, because let's face it, for a variety of reasons, a lot of us during this time were sort of engaging with the question of how comfortable is it to even be in the United States as an African American? I'm just going to keep it real. It's starting to pinch, and you're starting to dream. Is there somewhere to go? Is there somewhere to go where you can feel powerful, where you can have agency, where you can have a history that's full of your accomplishments and your strengths, without so much of the slavery, say, and the struggle, right? And I think that kind of utopian vision is very, very powerful throughout the African diaspora. So people in Brazil, Black people in Brazil, celebrating Wakanda, Blacks and even African nations where sometimes they might have had questions about some of the accents, they still could celebrate the idea of Wakanda, which is a place of freedom and possibility. And let's face it, that's something we've all been feeling a lack of. It's very nurturing and nourishing to imagine that Wakanda could be real.
Cadwell, what do you think?
No, I feel the same way. I'm really struck by that, thought of the utopian vision, having a place that you can point to that is anything that you can imagine. It's, like looking at that, that opening scene, I'm talking about the film again, where they come into Wakanda, when they break the barrier, and then you see the actual city. And it's just like this really interesting mesh of like history and culture, but also like, high tech skyscrapers and vehicles flying and trains. And it's a place that we all wish could exist. And, I feel like I could go there right now and see it. And it's, it was an opportunity, working on this to just get a little bit of that, be able to touch it just a little bit and feel some of that power. And I think that's what people gravitate to, that promise, that possibility.
And Sheree, what do you think? What makes Wakanda such an attractive idea to so many people?
Oh, I think because so many people around the world need a hero. We all need to feel as if we can overcome any problems, that technology can be used as a helpful tool and not as something that that exploits us. I think whether you are in Saudi Arabia or in China or in on the continent of Africa, or the nations in Africa, or in the Caribbean, or in the United States, you recognize something really wonderful and freeing to see, one, so many different images of womanhood, right? That was one of the great things about it. And also this ideal that though you have a lineage and you may be connected to royalty, you still have to prove that you are worthy to lead your community. I think that's something that a lot of communities can relate to. And it's just, for me, we're in a time where we're recognizing that, in this global economy where we're all connected, that the choices we make on one shore affects the other, right? And so when you have a nation that has managed to thrive, without necessarily colonizing others around them, without having that kind of antagonistic relationship, it gives you some hope on what we can do off the comic book page, out of the panel, and in the real world,
Exactly. So all three of you wrote vastly different stories. They were all great stories of Wakanda. So let me ask all of you, what made you decide to write the story that you wrote? And Sheree, I'll start with you. Heart of a Panther. What made you think to bring the Panther down to the Mississippi Delta? What's that story about?
Oh my gosh. It's about what I just said, really. It's about bringing the Panther home. Like I said, I watched how the Black Panther impacted so many people, got them interested in going back through the whole canon, collecting everything, looking at all the other characters, trying to find the other villains and everything. But for me, I wanted to show that there is a possibility of what the world could be like if the Black Panther kings had chosen to share some of their power with the rest of us. And so for me, taking the Panther, unbeknownst, he didn't know he was going to have to go there. Major problem happening in Wakanda with the heart-shaped herbs, and finding out that there is a whole nother community that is loosely connected to a Wakandan, right? Through the transatlantic slave trade, and who was trying to be free and chose to share that power with others, even though she herself never made it back home. To me, I thought I needed to write something that I could connect to emotionally. For me as a writer, I need to be able to connect to my characters. The Mississippi Delta is land that I know very closely, deeply. On both sides of my family, we are connected to it through Tennessee and Mississippi, as you are connected to both Ruleville, Mississippi, Sunflower County. And also this ideal that we have such a complicated relationship to the land now, right? So many people, they love gardening, they love that, but there are others who are very resistant because they associate it with, forced labor and making land fertile and profitable for other people and not for themselves. They see it as regressive. And I just wanted to show like some of the history and power of the Mississippi Delta, the richness of that culture, and have the, and also to have the Black Panther have to fight some gigantic, vibranium infected life forms.
And you did such a great job with that. Okay, I'll just let folks read about it. I don't even want to spoil any more of it.
Oh yeah.
Now, Cadwell, you took on the bad guy, who might not be the bad guy, but that's what you get when you start talking about Killmonger. He's the bad guy, or maybe he's not. So what made you want to delve into the mind of Killmonger?
Right. Yeah, it's it's interesting, like watching the film and seeing that character on screen for the first time. I empathized with his frustration, his anger, you know, and this is a thing that a lot of Black people generally, but you know, Black men specifically, have to engage with, like how to respond to oppression in a constructive way. And you see that, you know, Killmonger makes a certain kind of choice, and you know, T'Challa makes another kind of choice. And you know, I was very interested, and I'm generally interested in like tipping points with characters when they hit up against something that is challenging, and they could go down a number of different paths, and they have to choose one, and that path changes their whole trajectory of their life. And so I was trying to do with this story, you know, show that tipping point for Killmonger where he becomes Killmonger, you know, and it's through an incident of racial profiling that tips him over. But there's a lot happening in the story that shows that this is where he feels he needs to go anyway. Like he has this sense of responsibility to avenge, you know, his parents and all of these things from his past. And he was just getting a little bit of happiness. And then there's this thing that happens that, you know, I think in some ways it's a justification for himself to don that mantle and become the, you know, the villain that we know. But I thought this would be a really sympathetic moment, a moment where you would feel in some ways empowered, but also uncomfortable. And I think that that's the best kind of, you know, explorations where you're grappling with things that are both empowering and also difficult to name and understand.
And Tananarive, you took on what is my favorite relationship in all of comic bookdom. It's the relationship between T'Challa, the Black Panther, and Aurora Monroe, Storm of the X-Men. What made you decide to talk about that relationship and see where this fabulous couple is by the time they get to your story?
Talk about a power couple, right? Between T'Challa and Aurora. So I came to Marvel through the films, you know, through the MCU, and for various reasons, Storm has never been with T'Challa in the films. We don't have to get into the whole history of it, but it just hasn't been a thing. So on one level, it felt almost a little bit naughty, you know, to be able to write kind of like Aurora T'Challa fan fiction. I spend way too much time on Twitter. And that is just something that fans have really, really wanted to see. Just the imagination. You have T'Challa, who's so powerful, and you have Storm, who's an Omega level, you know, mutant. And because I think the thing of it is that for a lot of women, power is not attractive to men often. Not always, but often, the way women are attracted to power in men. It just doesn't, when you find that guy, you know, hang on tight, like someone who isn't intimidated, somebody whose ego can handle it, where you can sort of, like with my husband, Stephen Barnes, I feel like we're a lion and a lioness hunting together, but that doesn't always translate. So I really think in fiction, it's important for us to be able to imagine ourselves as women with power, being able to fly. I mean, that alone is just something from childhood that has been like a dream, literally when I'm asleep, but a daydream, that the gift of flight, the gift of power over the weather, and to think that you can, yeah, we make mistakes, and this character, you know, Storm, it didn't work out, let's just say. There's a whole big history behind it. Thank you, Jesse, for helping to walk me through it. There's a whole big history behind it. It didn't work out, but the idea of even a brief reconciliation, you know, there's only so much power you have when you're writing a short story in a well-established universe, like in the Marvel world. You can't just make it whatever you like, and they all, you know, but you can have that moment of being together again, trying to look back over the past and feel that sense of possibility. And I was really excited and honored to be able to write that story.
Well, I can tell you the emotional impact of all three of the stories that y'all wrote. I mean, I'm not too much of a man to say I might have shed a tear or two while I was reading some of these stories, because the emotional impact of the stories in Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, you have everything. You have emotion, you have adventure, you have stories of power, stories of powerlessness. You have all of that in one book and all wrapped around Wakanda, which is like, we all love the idea of Wakanda, which brings me to my next question. So I'm going to disguise a question about continuity by asking it this way. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby came up with the Black Panther a long time ago, and I think they both would be pleased with how the character has grown and expanded from their original idea. When you're sitting down writing a story about something like the Black Panther, how much do you concern yourself about what has gone on before? Do you really, is the idea of a connected universe so strong that it kind of constrains you? Or can you just really delve and tell stories that haven't really been told before? And I'll start with you with this one, Cadwell.
Oh, wow. It's incredibly intimidating. And, thank God I had you to help me out and to, walk me through a lot of this stuff as well. I think my response to that was writing something that was pretty well established, but a small moment, like finding like a little gap within the story and like just stretching that out as much as I could and making something out of it. I think if I was thinking about like rethreading some ground that was already well established, I would have dissolved into a puddle. So I think having the opportunity to find something that I thought was really interesting and then like tease it apart was my response to it.
Tananarive, how much does continuity really mean to you as a fan and a writer?
Well, listen, because I didn't come through the comics, there's a lot of continuity. I just don't know. So if you tell me an entertaining story, I'll believe it. But I also, had to bear in mind that I am writing for fans, hopefully. A lot of readers would be coming because they knew the films, but also a lot would be coming who have been reading the comics. They've read the Christopher Priest run, they've read the Reggie Hudlin run, they've read the Nydia Okorafor run. I mean, there's been so many, right? And while I couldn't crash course in everything, I could pick up on the major bullet points in this relationship is what I wanted to focus on. Like, who were they when they met as young people? That's important. And I think that's universal because we all remember young love and being at that stage when you're about to walk into the world and you wonder if there will be someone to walk at your side, and the events that had kind of come between them. You have to understand what happened, right? But all of that to me is just sort of the table setting. And the meal is when you delve into the emotions. And that's where I think backstory can be very helpful. Because when you ask, who are we as characters? We are a reflection of our experiences. We are a reflection of our traumas. We are a reflection of our triumphs. So the more I know about their pain, the more I know about what they've been through, what tore them apart, it helps me find that light. Whereas a writer, sure, it's exciting to write about somebody else's characters, but at a certain point, you have to make those characters your own in your head, because that's what writing is. You inhabit this character. So it was helpful ultimately, even though, like Cadwell said, it's very intimidating to try to absorb all the backstory. But once it's there, it really helps you find the heartbeat of who these people are and what they've been through.
Sheree, there's the Black Panther that's in the comic book. There's the Black Panther that's in the movie. There's the Black Panther that are in the novel. When you're writing Black Panther, which one are you looking at? Or are you trying to combine all three? Or are you going your own way in your own story? Sheree, you're muted, unfortunately.
I'm thinking of the spirit of the Black Panther that I encountered. The first one I encountered, of course, was the comic books, because I used to sell it at an independent bookstore, independent Black bookstore / art gallery in downtown Memphis. And anything that had Black characters in it we had for our families. You know, people want to encourage their young people to read. Comics are a wonderful gateway for that. It is a perfect combination of the word, beautiful vocabulary, that they would learn, you know, even at a young age, and seeing it in context with these amazing illustrations, the art, the colors, the lettering, all of that works really well to get people stimulated and interested in reading. So we had that there. And of course, I'm nosy, I'm reading it too, because unfortunately I wasn't able to partake in the comic book addiction as a child. So I just thought it was really cool. Fast forward, and you know, I'm really was blown away by Chadwick Boseman's performance, how he embodied the role. And so when I was writing first, like Tananarive, I gathered myself all the books that I could afford at the time. You know, I couldn't buy the entire library, but I got a lot of the books, so I could try to map out for myself T'Challa's family tree. You know, because there's, you know, the comic book. I mean, he's, you know, his mother's, his brothers, you know, and the different relationships. And so I wanted to just map that out first and see who is this young person who's eventually becomes the Black Panther. He had a whole nother life before he ascended to the throne, before, you know, he successfully fought to be the Black Panther. And so I wanted in my story to think about, you know, places where I've been myself, on the crossroad, when you have to decide which life do I want to live, which path do I want to go, you know what I mean? And and is this right for me? It may be right for the community, but is it right for me? How do I be okay with these choices? Because to me, a leader and a king who never doubts themselves, who never questions, is one I wouldn't trust. You know, you must, I mean, if you have so much responsibility, you have to think very deeply and widely about how you're moving in the world. And so I wanted to kind of explore, you know, different moments of T'Challa's life, because he and his sister Shuri experienced a lot of loss before they, you know, became their full selves. So it's like you're looking at the continuity of what other writers have done before, what are some of the challenges that the character has had, but then you kind of put that in the back of your mind, and then you just got to write. You got to write and tell the story. You have to give it its own life and breath. And thank goodness for you, and thank goodness for copy editors.
Amen, amen. Copy editors out there, yes. We love y'all because you save us every time.
Yeah.
All right, so I know as writers and editors, we're not supposed to read reviews of our own work. But sometimes you're just clicking around on the internet and you find a review and it just sucks you in. So one of the reviews I read for Black Panther Tales of Wakanda said that it was Afrofuturism disguised as science fiction writing. So I'm going to bring that to all of you. First of all, what do you call Afrofuturism? And is Black Panther Tales of Wakanda it? So, Tananarive, I saw your face, so I'm going to go to you first.
Yes, I'm glad someone brought that up. Okay, yes, it is Afrofuturism. I don't know why that would be hurled about as if it's an insult, because there's nothing that excludes science fiction from Afrofuturism. I teach at UCLA, and I also have a private course I teach on Afrofuturism. And my broad definition used to be that it was the speculative arts of the African diaspora. The speculative arts, meaning, and speculative meaning science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism, comic books, but arts meaning films, books, music, Janelle Monáe, right, is Afrofuturism, fusion of sounds. And I will make the distinction, however, that Nnedi Okorafor has coined the term now African futurism, which is futurism created by writers from the African diaspora, as well as African Jujuism, okay? So I would consider these all cousins, but none of that is exclusive of science fiction. And I'm almost wondering what the reviewer meant, that it's Afrofuturism disguised as science fiction, as if there's some illegitimacy to the idea of having Black science fiction, which Afrofuturism also is. And, you know, comics come across as futurism because of the tech and the gadgets and that sort of thing, almost as if those two things should be kept separate. And I don't know, I don't want to try to guess what the reviewer was thinking, but yes, Black Panther is Afrofuturism. It's comics. I don't know, there are some people who would consider some comics science fiction. It would depend on your definition more of science fiction, I think. But yeah, Black Panther is Afrofuturism, and it has science fiction aspects. And I think all of the speculative arts can be one big happy family.
Cadwell, jump in here with this one.
Yeah, I mean, mostly I'll just agree with Tananarive's definition. I think there's no line that I can see. And so, like thinking about Wakanda specifically, it's alternate history, but that's also a subgenre of speculative fiction. Speculative fiction is really broad, and I really like Tananarive's definition of Afrofuturism as being really broad. All the arts, all the mediums, all the imaginings of the African diaspora, and I just think, yeah, as broad as the speculative fiction definition is, and as broad as Afrofuturism is, I think the Venn diagram is the same. They're the same circle, and the idea that they would be separate, I think, is tied up with some problematic ideas. Why would there even be a separation? Definitely the same.
Sheree, what do you think?
I agree with everything that's been said. For me, science fiction, speculative fiction, Afrofuturism, African futurism, these are terms that we use to try to orient our work and give context for readers, to give context for what we're trying to do, right? African futurism was actually coined by Pamela Sundstrom, a visual artist from Africa on the continent. She came up with that term and actually wrote a scholarly paper about it in a literary journal, academic journal. And Nady has defined it specifically for herself to talk about the work that she's doing over the years, where she centers African culture and mythology and perspectives with Jujuism, I think she's calling it, and also with the science. So they're like, for her, it's two different streams, but under the umbrella for her of African futurism, which I think she spells it a little, differently than Pamela did. But for me, all of this is science fiction and fantasy. All of it is speculative work. Afrofuturism is an umbrella term that can, I think, comfortably incorporate all of the Africa and her diaspora. African futurism allows you to very specifically look at works that are coming from African writers and history and tradition. And it's real estate at the end of the day. Works that center Black people, Black culture, and Black ideals in its heart is what we're talking about, because it actually wasn't so very common in the larger industry. In terms of being celebrated, read, discussed, even though, as history has shown us all over the world, and not just in English, right? That all peoples dream and imagine, and we all have cultures that have mythology and fantasy. And so this is just bringing that early human impulse to tell a story around the fire or wherever we were, or over the river, and to make sense of the stars and everything. It's come full circle. But we are telling our own stories now, and that's the difference. Instead of it being other people writing about safari tales and Africa and kind of like Edward Rice Burroughs tales, where the people are actually set dressing, and everything else takes priority. We have decided that we want to make our own stories and culture take precedence. And who embodies that better than a character in a nation that is beholden to no one else, that is responsible with its power, right? And is actually a beacon of hope for the future. So that's what Afrofuturism can represent. You can get in where you fit in. It's a stream, it's a river. It's always being explored and expanded, and new generations will do even more exciting things with it than we've already been seeing with this re-emergence of interest in in all of this work. So I'm excited. It's a great time. It's a great time.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's the answer from the editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. So you know she knows what she's talking about. So I just had to get it in there, Sheree. You know I had to say it at least once.
So to add one thing, Jesse, about Afrofuturism that I think is so beautiful and is so well embodied in Black Panther is that it's like Cadwell said, alternate history is a version of Afrofuturism or speculative fiction as well. So in a lot of Afrofuturism, you have the past, present, and future together, right? In the same space. I remember there was some criticism when the film Black Panther came out about the idea of people having spears. You know, they're such a technologically advanced country. Why would they have the spears? Well, A, Thor has a hammer. So, but also that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point, that Wakanda has not lost its sense of history and ritual and tradition, even while it has all of this futuristic technology. It's both of those things that make Wakanda strong.
Oh, wow, that's so true. See, I'm even learning stuff here. With just being around these great writers, I learned so much. Okay, so now that we've launched Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda out there into the world, and don't forget, it's available now, but all your finer bookstores, on ebook and on audiobook. So what are you doing now? Now that I don't have to harangue you for your Black Panther story, what are you doing now? Let's start with Cadwell. Where can we find you? Where can we find more of your writing?
Yeah, so, you know, my debut novel came out not very long ago, and I've just been, you know, hard at work on this second book that's coming out in September. And so that's been taking up a bulk of my time, that book, and then the follow-up to that book as well. And, you know, I read a lot of, yes, the lesson. I don't know why I don't actually name titles. And then the upcoming book is No Gods, No Monsters. I have the arc right here. But yeah, and you know, I also write short fiction. You know, I've had a few short fiction stories published in various speculative magazines. I've been trying to get into fantasy and science fiction for a while, fingers crossed. But yeah, so short fiction and some spec markets, and then the novels right now. And I also am working on something with Realm as well. I was excited to hear that Tananarive was working on something, because I'm working on something with Realm as well.
All right. So Tananarive, since you and Cadwell are in this special space out there, tell us what you're working on.
This is, like everyone's been saying, this is a really incredible time. So I've been super blessed to be busy breaking into my fourth career, which is screenwriting. I collaborate with my husband, Stephen Barnes, and we are working on scripts for the new Shudder AMC Black Anthology series, which I think we're talking about in another panel, actually. And also I have a novel coming out, The Reformatory, in 2022. We have a graphic novel coming out called The Keeper, Black horror, in 2022. And just writing short stories when I can. That's really my heart. I love short stories. And I think just, and one last thing, my Afrofuturism course that I teach in UCLA, I also have a version that Stephen Barnes and I taught online that is available, take your own pace, at www.afrofuturismwebinar.com.
All right, everybody rush over there and get in that course. I know I'm going to do it. Now, Sheree, I know you are incredibly busy. Not only are you the editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, but tell us all of the other stuff you're working on.
Well, I'm excited. My first all prose collection is out from Third Man Books. It's called 9 Bar Blues, Stories from an Ancient Future. There it is. Woo! 9 Bar Blues, 16 stories, loosely connected through musical forms, but it's science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and I guess some of the things that we don't really easily classify. So yeah, there's that. Of course, thank you so much for mentioning the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. This is our May-June issue, which I'm happy to say is probably the most diverse issue the magazine has published in its 72 years of history. It's founded in 1949. And so I was very happy to be able to include so many different voices. and that short stories are my favorite form. Like Tananarive, I love him so much. So it's just a pleasure to work with writers on short stories. I am a guest curating a big Afrofuturism citywide festival in New York City for Carnegie Hall with some amazing Afrofuturists in multiple forms, with King Britt and Yatasha Womack and Ronaldo Anderson and Adrienne Fuchs at Carnegie Hall. So that will be happening next spring 22. And I have 2 anthologies coming out. One this fall is Trouble the Waters, Tales from the Deep Blue, which is wonderful water-based speculative fiction for people around the world. So that's going to be a lot of fun coming out from Third Man Books. I can't wait for everyone to read that. And then next year, African Risen is coming out, which is a collection that I'm co-editing with Ogene Kochowe, Donald Ekpeke, who is a Nebula Award finalist this year, as well as Zelda Knight. And my goodness, the stories are wonderful. And that will be coming from Tora.com Publishing. So, yeah.
So all of these fabulous writers are doing fabulous things. I urge you to follow them on their websites or their social media, where you're going to see nothing but fabulous work. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So I want to thank Cadwell Turnbull, Tananarive Due, Sheree Renee Thomas for taking time out of their busy writing schedules to be with us here at Comic-Con. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much. Once again, my name is Jesse J. Holland. I'm the editor of Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. We want to thank Titan Books and Marvel for letting us be part of this great Black Panther universe. Once again, Comic-Con. Hope you're really enjoying it, and hopefully we'll see you all next year in person. Thank you so much to all of you for being here today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. That was fantastic.
That was awesome.